1, 2, 3, 4. I got thoughts running through my head. I got thoughts, can't you see? I got thoughts, the books I read. I got thoughts, won't you listen to me?
Insur-redneck-tion. Hello, and welcome to The Author Has Thoughts. I am the author in question, Gary Ballard, author of 12 novels and novellas, including 5 novels in the Bridge Chronicles Cyberpunk series, 1 short story collection set in the same series, and a set of 6 novellas called the Stepping Stone Cycle, a recrafting of the Lovecraftian Cthulhu Mythos. So you notice I'm in slightly different studio area. I'm kind of shoved in a corner. This is my bedroom now. The wife got the studio bedroom to use as her she shed, so I'm in here with this, and I've got a new camera too. I'm not quite sure how it's going to work out yet, but you know, it's kind of a cheapo camera, but we'll see how it works. The new puppies that we got like a month and a half ago decided to chew through the cable of the other one, and this is just one I grabbed off Amazon, so we'll see how it works. I'm recording this on Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday, and that's relevant because the subject of today's lecture, rant, whatever you want to call it, is the insurrection at the Capitol, which will now be known as the Insur-redneck-tion. Brandon Tenold, if you ever watch this, you'll excuse me for stealing your bit. The insurrection at the Capitol, or the riot at the Capitol, or, you know, basically just traitors, actual traitors, as in those who commit treason. A bunch of traitor monkeys running up to the Capitol and flinging their poo, basically, because that's about what it accomplished. And this happened the 6th, so it's about a week and a half ago now. All the news, channels have been on about it, and I understand, and I'm glad they're actually hammering home the idea that this wasn't just a protest. This wasn't just people expressing their dissatisfaction to the government. This was an actual riot, an actual insurrection. This was, in my opinion, seditious and treason against the country of the United States, which is funny because at least one of the dipshits was photographed happily carrying the Confederate flag through the Capitol, the flag of a traitor nation, a bunch of treasonous people who rebelled against the United States government because they might not be allowed to own other human beings and profit off of their free labor. Very relevant. Very relevant on Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday. Because this wasn't a multiracial thing. This wasn't a valid protest, in my opinion. This was white supremacy trying to flex its dying muscles. Plain and simple. This was about white people afraid that suddenly they aren't the default anymore, and pitching an absolute fit. And there's so many facets to this that just makes that crystal fucking clear. But let's just start with the response. I've had a couple of videos where I've talked about the George Floyd protests back in the summer, and the pandemic, and racial inequality and that sort of thing. One of the things I complained vehemently about back then was the response to the protesters outside the White House, who were peacefully demonstrating to illustrate their problems with the systemic racism in the country. And if you remember, the most startling image of that was seeing those protesters blasted aside with tear gas and flashbangs and rubber bullets and everything short of just rolling over them with tanks and flamethrowers to get them out of the way, simply so the president could walk across the street and hold up a Bible in front of a church. That's it. That's all that happened. And he did that to those peaceful protesters who had not in any way done any of the things or indicated in any way that there were going to be a threat. An actual threat. A we're going to fuck some shit up threat. Yeah, there was some stuff broken. There was, in a few places, Kenosha, there's places that were, not Kenosha, well, Kenosha was later, I guess, but Milwaukee, there were places that were set on fire. And in some cases, we've actually discovered that that was outside agitators, Proud Boys and the like, and 3%ers and those, who were trying to make the BLM, the Black Lives Matter protesters, look bad. But again, everything about those protests were peaceful, were about being peaceful. All the organizers said, we need to be peaceful. We need to not give them, a reason to crack down on us. It was just video after video of people standing there, no weapons in their hands, just getting pummeled with, pepper bullets and rubber bullets and batons and tear gas and pepper spray and mace and just all sorts of just asynchronous response. Just overbearing police brutality in protests that were about stopping police brutality, racially biased police brutality. So those protesters got to endure all of that. And a great number of them were African American, or at the very least were non-white. But there was, plenty of white folks protesting right alongside them, and it was really heartening to see. This, however, was not. Now, there are pictures that show some African Americans involved in this crowd, but 99.99999% of this crowd was white. Straight up white. White as I am. Rather than see the type of response and preparations that BLM got, Black Lives Matter got, which was federal troops in camo helmets, full-on riot gear, all the stuff. Rather than all that waiting for these protesters, who, by the way, had been talking about causing a ruckus for the week prior, or even longer. Rather than that, what we got was Capitol Police left all on their own to try to keep people out of the Capitol. No riot shields, no riot gear, very little in the way of non-lethal deterrence, and flimsy-ass little barricades. That was it. That's all they had. That's all they were given. That's all they were told they needed. And the people in charge of the Capitol Police were all like, well, we didn't expect this to be this bad. Even though we now have reports saying that 3 days before it happened, the Capitol Police were legitimately made aware of violent threats against them. Hell's bells. I don't follow a lot of these movements. I'm not deep in the idiotosphere, but I have people who are, and I try to keep myself fairly informed. I knew from Twitter that there was going to be some shit started. Now, I didn't think they'd go as far as they did, but give an idiot a platform and he'll dive off of it. But I knew this was happening. In fact, when my wife told me, hey, they're breaking into the Capitol, I happened to be working from home that day, I was like, okay, so they did it. And then I started laughing. And I laughed because I knew that not only was this dumb as dirt, it was just destined to be completely ineffectual. It had no chance of a actual success. If by success you notice anything, you think of anything that they said they wanted, such as not having the election of Joe Biden certified, ensuring that Trump has a second term, all of these things. This was not only was this not going to accomplish that, it was going to accomplish the exact opposite of that. Now, the reason this would never have accomplished any of the goals that they want is because the goals they want are not grounded in reality. Most of those protesters, many of them, were QAnon supporters. Now, I'm not going to go into QAnon too much other than to say that it is a batshit insane conspiracy theory that makes flat earthers, 911 truthers, chemtrail people look sane. It's just batshit. And to hear some of these people start talking about it, there's no connection to reality with these folks, with QAnon folks. They have decided to set sail on the merry ship of batshittery, and that ship ain't coming anywhere near the rest of us in terms of, just actually having a grip on reality. So the idea that a president, that they're, storming the Capitol to do something would accomplish anything like, installing Trump for a second term or whatever, it's just crazy. And there's a video going around, and I'm not actually gonna cut in with any videos this insurrection, because I don't want to give these dipshits any more credit than they have already. I don't want to give them any more sunlight. They've had enough sunlight. It's time for them to crawl back under the rocks they came from. But there's one video that just came out, I just saw yesterday, of some of the guys who got into the Senate chamber. And they're rifling through papers and looking at it, and it's like, what is this? What is this? There's got to be something we can use on these scumbags. What did you think? That you would just stroll into the Senate chambers carrying batons or riot shields or whatever you were, and dressed in your camo cosplay, and that not only would the Senate and the House not have evacuated, because that's what they do when terrorists attack the Capitol, they would evacuate the important people away from danger, but do you think they just have like reams of paper sitting around showing where all the children they've hidden for sacrifice are? Like, is there a folder on each one of their desks labeled crimes, evidence of crimes? I mean, what did you think was going to happen? What did you think you would find there? Now, one of them I think got away with a laptop. That's what I'm hearing now from one of the congresspersons. And sure, it's entirely possible if you crack the laptop, you may find something on there that might be incriminating, or, okay. But what would that accomplish? Nothing. But the overwhelming theme I keep hearing from these chowderheads is that the election was stolen from us, and we're going to go take it back. We're going to take our country back. Now, what they mean is enough black people and non-conservative / Republican / fascist voted against my guy that he lost, and we can't have that. We can't have the wrong people voting. That's really the underlying current here, because we're talking about, this is just a continuation of white supremacy. Just because we passed the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act in the 60s does not mean white supremacy went away. It hasn't. It burrowed a little deeper. It became a little more systemic. It became a little more passive. But it's still there. We see symbols of it every day. Hell, my state just this past few weeks ratified a new flag that removed the flag which contained the Confederate battle flag inside of it. White supremacy didn't go away. It's still alive and kicking. And in many cases, the grand old party, the Republicans, have nurtured it. They've used it in the same way they use the evangelicals, in the same way they use the middle class, by telling them a whole bunch of lies that they're the chosen ones, they're the special ones, and these others that they either implicitly or explicitly point to, they're the ones getting the stuff that you deserve. Real Americans, the real America, which is not urban and coastal and liberal and elite and whatever, you're the ones getting things taken from you. It's a pervasive sense of victimhood based around the idea that if black people or Muslims or secular people or atheists or homosexual or non-gender binary, it's that if all those folks are treated the same as you being, generally speaking, white, male, Christian, straight, if they're treated the same as you, suddenly you're less special. Well, no, you're just equal. Equality is not a zero-sum game. Just to give a black person the same opportunity as a white person does not make that white person any less equal. It makes them equal, not greater than. Not the default, the privilege. And over again, I see people who get arrested, people who've been arrested, or social media video of these rioters, and the just naked levels of entitlement is sickening. The real estate agent, white, blonde real estate agent, female real estate agent, I think from Arizona, but it doesn't really matter where she's from, who flew on a private jet to the Capitol to storm the Capitol and take it back. Take what back? You have enough money to charter a private jet to fly to D.C. You realize there's people that haven't even been on a public jet, on a regular old, value jet or whatever, Delta. They've never flown in their life because they can't afford it. What are we taking away from you? What is anybody taking away from you? You have the American dream. Why aren't you happy with it? Because you might have to pay more in taxes? How the fuck do you think you got what you got? It wasn't only your hard work. It was the infrastructure around you that allowed you, who started off on third base and thought you hit a triple, to get what you have. And suddenly, because your guy didn't win the presidential election, the country's been stolen from you. Let me tell you about the country being stolen from you. And this is something I've been learning recently by visiting the Mississippi Civil Rights Museum. Things that, even with my education, I did not exactly know, even about my own state. Shortly after the Civil War, black people were given, the freed slaves were given the right to vote in this state, and lo and behold, the numbers of freed slaves, black people who voted, was greater than the number of people who were white in this state. I think at one point it was like 66% of registered voters in Mississippi were, African Americans. As a result, many of the statewide offices were filled with black politicians. Many of them. Now, we only sent a couple of folks to Washington, D.C. during that time. But what happened because of that was a literal white lash. We had white folks attacking black folks in various places, militias, Ku Klux Klan and all that, attacking places. It got so bad that many of the black politicians asked for help from Ulysses S. Grant. Asked him to send National Guard or military to quell what was essentially an insurrection against the legally elected officials who happened to be African American. Grant said no because he wanted I believe it was at the time, the Republicans to support his chosen successor for president and not a different one, not a different candidate. They did. He didn't send the troops, and as a result, that was essentially the birth of Jim Crow laws in Mississippi. And that happened in so many places, and it went on and on. The massacre in Tulsa, Oklahoma, that was shown, that I talked about, that was shown in the Watchmen TV series, as well as Lovecraft Country, actually. That happened in the 1900s. And just over and over, black people would get something of their own as a community or as individuals, and the white people couldn't take it, and they took it back by force if necessary.